Greetings, Guardians, True Vanguard here, bringing you a review of the new King's Fall exclusive raid scout rifle, the Doom of Chelchis, or Chelchis, or however the crap you want to pronounce the name. The bottom line is it looks really cool. Pops out of the chest at the end of the Oryx fight. If you manage to drop him, you could potentially be rewarded with this scout rifle. And one of the first things I noticed about this scout rifle was how powerful it sounds. Just give a listen. Now, one quick warning before we get into the skills of this weapon. Some people are reporting that these weapon drops from the Oryx fight do not go to the Postmaster. And while I haven't been able to confirm or deny that claim, just make sure you got room in your inventory or send some stuff to the vault from your app if you need to, and don't run the risk. So here's the Doom. It looks pretty incredible. I love the aesthetics. Has Will of Light like all the other raid weapons, which makes it so that it does additional damage against taken enemies. You have a few different options for the muzzle here. I tend to roll with linear compensator because I like having less recoil, and I'll talk about that in a bit. Comes with Cocoon, which is a pretty cool perk. Makes it so that when you holster the weapon in favor of another one, then after a few short seconds, the weapon will automatically reload from your reserves. Doesn't give you free ammo, but it does go ahead and reload the weapon for you. Now, I prefer small bore, especially in PvP, because this weapon does have a bit of a kick. Life support here makes it so that you can potentially regenerate health if you have low health coming out of an engagement after a kill. Now, this ends up being a pretty solid weapon to use in PvE. I took it into strikes and even used it in a couple of portions of the raid that I replayed with some friends. And when fighting taken opponents, this is a pretty good choice. The effective range on this weapon is really what makes it shine. There's pretty little damage drop-off at pretty significant range. The range on it is equal to a number of snipers in the game. And so you're not going to see damage drop-off that's going to affect how engagements play out, unless you're in really wide open spaces. But for the most part, you're probably not going to tell a difference at all in terms of the damage output that you do, especially not in PvP, and we'll get to that in a little bit later. But from some of my engagements that I got into in PvE, it looked like the damage buff that you get against taken opponents is roughly 10%, both body shots and crits. So it turns out to be a pretty decent choice for PvE, especially in the new sections of the game, since there's a new focus on these taken opponents popping up in strikes that we've even played well in the past. They added in some of these taken opponents, so it's a pretty versatile weapon in PvE, and you may find that you like it. Now in PvP, I ended up making this my go-to primary for the time being in the elimination playlist. I did that because in the elimination playlist, people tend to keep their distance a lot more. They play a lot more passively, a lot more defensively, and are a little bit less aggressive, generally speaking, for the most part. So when opponents are keeping their distance like that, this weapon, because of its incredible effective range, can really shine. Even in some of the longest spaces that I engaged opponents in, the weapon was still doing 42 to the body and 63 to the head. It does that same amount of damage at point blank range, so the damage drop-off is pretty much non-existent in PvP. Not unless you get into some of these maps like First Light, or Bastion, or Sky Shock even. But for the most part, most of the maps that you're going to end up playing in PvP, you're going to have some closer engagements, and even the longest sections of the map won't even play into the damage drop-off range of this weapon. So that's a good thing. Now, the holographic sight on this weapon is really nice. It's not very obstructive, and that's one of the things that we run into as a problem with some of the other weapons in the game that are primaries, is that sometimes the sights are more obstructive than they are anything else. They're gaudy. The edges of it get in the way, cloud up your sight picture, and limit your field of vision considerably while focusing in on a small portion. The thing about this scout rifle is that you can see pretty much everything still when you're ADS. When you aim down these sights, you're still going to have a pretty unobstructive sight picture. You can see the peripherals. You can see if someone is approaching from the sides. And that's definitely something that's going to benefit you, especially in 6v6 playlists, because there's so much crowded space sometimes in these 6v6 playlists that it's nice to be able to see everything when you ADS, so that nothing can really sneak up on you, at least not as easily as it can otherwise if the sights are obstructive. So ultimately, can we recommend that you use this scout rifle? I would say in PvE, absolutely, especially when fighting taken opponents, especially in the raid when you have some of these rooms and fights where having the ability to shoot things from a longer range with a primary and still not have damage drop off. Things like the War Priest fight when you're shooting across to the other side of the room to help with adds, or even to take down knights, which is a crucial part of that fight. Or even the Golgoroth fight when you have to clear adds at the beginning and sometimes in between the phases of DPS on Golgoroth, when you kind of look down the sides of those hallways to clear those adds, could be helpful there. In PvP, there are definitely better scout rifles to go with. I still think that the Mida multi-tool is the scout rifle that sort of reigns supreme in the Crucible because of its versatility, its agileness, and this weapon just can't compete with that in my opinion. It's still a decent scout rifle in PvP, and I think that you could definitely do well with it, absolutely. And I in fact had some really good games with it. But I just felt a lot less, or a lot more restricted than I would have felt with my Mida multi-tool. So that's my 2 cents. This has been True Vanguard with PlanetDestiny, and we hope to catch you later, Guardians.